with Tony Brinkhaus. Tony, glad to have you on the documentary. Brinkhaus' name has been a popular one through the years at Jefferson football, starting way back in the early days. So just kind of run us through. Obviously, you played, but you're not the only Brinkhaus.
I'm not the only Brinkhaus. No, I came through here. I graduated in 2003. My brother Andy was an '06 grad, so we both played Jefferson football. Had a lot of fun, made some great memories. But before us, I had an Uncle Jim who played here in the late '70s as well. And then if we go over to my mom's side of the family, the Roods played here through the '70s. So it's a family affair here, and a lot of good memories from both sides of the family.
Great lineage, maybe more from your mom's side of the family. Tom Root is one of the all-time greats for Jefferson. So just kind of growing up, did you always know you wanted to be a Jaguar football player? Obviously, your career went further than that, but at the high school level, it started right here.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because when I was going into third grade, my parents got divorced, and we started out, I was a Valley View kid. And then we switched over, and for third grade, I was at Oak Grove. And then fourth grade, I went to Valley View. And so I say that because by the time I went through elementary school, I had been in like every part of Bloomington. And I knew people on both sides. And actually, by the time I got to high school, we lived right in the middle of Bloomington. So we lived off of 98th and Penn. And
right on that line.
Right on the line. And, having grown up in a Jefferson family, like I was definitely pulled in this direction, so I really wanted to come here and was happy to come here and be a Jaguar. So yeah, but it's interesting because I had so many relationships on both sides of the fence, and it wasn't a tough decision by any means, but I definitely knew this is where I wanted to be.
Yeah, my wife lived very similar area. Could have gone, probably should have gone to Kennedy, but wanted to be in the Jefferson marching band. So that was divine intervention for me, also being in the band. But Tony, just talk about your days at Jefferson. You wouldn't know it looking at you now, but you played offensive line, right? So why was that the position for you? And obviously it was probably the correct call from everybody because that's what you ended up doing in college too.
Yeah. So that's another interesting story because I actually, my favorite position was defensive tackle. That was the position that I played the most in high school. That was kind of my ticket from my freshman year. I made the jump up to the sophomore team, and at that point I was playing both ways. But my sophomore year, when I played varsity for the first time, I was starting D tackle, and that was really where my love was. I loved getting after the quarterback, making a tackle for a loss, and that's where I got really close with Coach Carlson. And actually, even looking to football beyond high school, a big reason I committed to the University of Minnesota was because they told me I could play defensive tackle, and it took all of about 2 weeks before they moved me to offensive line when I got there, which was the right move, but I was a big kid. I was 295 pounds as a high school, probably junior, and it just made it a lot easier to move people around when you're that size, and we had a great weight program here, so I think the combination of those things, it just worked out really well.
You mentioned Coach Carlson. Who else on the coaching staff really helped you get to where you ultimately wanted to be? You got a Division I Big Ten offer from the home state school at that time, had some great teams.
Yeah.
So who here at Jefferson really aided you throughout that process?
Yeah. There's a lot. I appreciate you asking. I think Coach Carlson is the one that we just had this bond because he kind of, he's a fiery guy, and especially when, my sophomore year, there was two of us who were starting as sophomores next to each other as D tackles, and I don't know what nicknames he had for us, but he made fun of us a lot in the way that coaches do, where, he loved us and he was hard on us, but he knew he was kind of raising some kids among these, juniors and seniors. So that was just a natural one. I stayed in touch with him, through college and beyond. Levy, who was our head coach, obviously very close with him, the Gopher connection. He was also my track coach. I was a thrower, even though Levy had never thrown the shot or discus. We spent a lot of time together out in the fields here, learning how to throw the shot and discus together, so that was fun. And then, I think about even people like Coach Guess, who was our, he ran our weight room, and he was a baseball coach, which wasn't where I had any success. But I talked about even just the bonds and the time we put in the weight room together, and that to me was a big one. Just work ethic, I think we had a very good strength program then. If I were to maybe pull one more name, Coach Bird on the offensive line, our own coordinator as well. He obviously had experience that went beyond me with my uncles, and he was here for so long. His fingerprints are all over this program. But those are probably the ones that at least come top of mind.
You also had a chance to play with your brother here at Jefferson. What was that experience like to kind of aid him as not only a leader on the team, but as a big brother?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. We never got to share a huddle together actually, but it's kind of the beauty of high school sports, right? Like, you grow up playing with your buddies. You finally get to the level where you're trying to get on the field and, say, play a varsity sport, or even just work your way through the freshman or sophomore teams. And then, to see the younger guys come up and just kind of respect that process. And people like myself who got kind of thrown into the mix as a sophomore, that's not always well received by the older guys, but I think when you have a good culture and you got guys who are working hard and who can contribute and help the team, it was fun for me to be able to see Andy grow and develop. And then he also got the opportunity to go to the U of M with me, and it was a little bit different there because, he was on the scout team, and I would see him in a little different light than I would here back in high school. But yeah, it was great. And, to know that we had uncles who played here before us, and it's pretty, I think that's part of the beauty of just high school sports in general, and being able to, come up through the BAA system and then play in front of your community and all your buddies and family. That's what it's all about.
And you continued to play in front of your home community at the U. When did you realize, hey, this is something that I could take beyond the walls and the property here at Jefferson?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I had a moment per se, but I think when I was able to start as a sophomore, I started to think, okay, maybe there's an opportunity here. And then as I progressed from there, I would get the recruiting letters, and I had a teammate in Brian Sikora who was a year above me. He also went to the U of M, so I kind of saw his path and saw that happen. And then I started attending some camps and just started getting some recognition where I was like, okay, I think I'm going to have an opportunity here. And then by my junior year, I wouldn't say I was trying to make a decision before my senior year, but it just kind of happened that way. I was really focused on Minnesota and Nebraska, and Nebraska wanted me to play offensive line, and Minnesota said, we'd love to have you as a D tackle. So that was one of the deciding factors, but yeah, no regrets. It was an awesome decision for me, and I had a great experience there.
And Glenn Mason and the rest of the coaches had a pretty good track record of developing offensive linemen, especially during your time there. What was it like to be part of some of the most prolific rushing teams in Big Ten history?
Yeah, I think that helped to soften the blow of making the change to offense. Honestly, we
got Barber and Maroney back here.
Right? These guys know what to do when they get the ball. Yeah. There was some great. I was talking about culture earlier. Our offensive line culture there was so good. There were guys like Greg Esslinger who, he started as a freshman at 240 pounds at center, and he was really good, which is just crazy in this day and age. Mark Setterstrom, another guy. Both of those guys were All-Americans. Both got drafted. And then you mentioned Maroney, Barber. I was in the same recruiting class as Lawrence Maroney, which was awesome. He was an incredible guy. He still is. But as a running back, to be able to, you give a guy like that an inch and he's gone. And then, I think the system we were in too was well suited for me. Like I mentioned here in high school, I was a big guy, 6'3", 295. You get to the Big Ten and everybody's that size. So, the system that we ran was it was a zone scheme, and it was more about being athletic and getting out on the edge and just, giving those running backs an inch, and less about having to, block shotgun for 5-6 seconds. So it was just kind of a perfect storm, and for me it's just a good fit. And, the coaches there, I had very strong relationships with Mason, and my offensive coordinator at the U of M was Mitch Browning. He kind of was the offensive coordinator, and he coached our tackles and tight ends, and tackles a position that I played for a couple of years, and I think it worked out pretty well. I got to play quite a bit.
A lot of the players that have gone on to play at all levels of college talked about how the Jefferson coaches and program really helped prepare them for that next level. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. In fact, don't let my change of position, that's not an indictment on Coach Carlson. In fact, I will say, So Coach Tom Sims was my D-tackle coach, and great guy. I can remember in camp, there was a period in my second week at the U where I was running with the twos as a D-tackle. And part of that was injuries. Part of that, was just you're there and you get opportunities. And I remember Coach C had us dialed in. Anytime we ran, anytime the team that we were up against ran a counter or a trap and your guard blocked down, there was a slingshot technique that he had me anytime I saw a guard go down, I was grabbing a hip and coming down the line. And I remember during one of the first scrimmages I had an opportunity to play in at the U, I came down the line, made a tackle for loss 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and Coach Sims, my second week, a week before I got moved positions, made a point to say, hey, you must have had a really good high school coach. And I made sure to tell Coach C that. And it's not just me blowing smoke and trying to, pump him up. It was genuine. He was a tough love coach, but he hammered these things in. And the reason why he was so focused on that was Eden Prairie. They ran 8 plays, and that was one of them. And if you could stop that play, there's a third of their offense is out. And it was just one of those things muscle memory. And I went to the U, and that was still there. And I think that's a great example of what I was able to take with me versus some people who just win on pure athleticism and strength. I think we had a really good, strong coaching staff here.
Tell us about some stories of back in high school, you and some buddies.
Okay, so I mentioned I came up as a sophomore, and you're kind of getting thrown into this crew of guys who you don't know very well. So there was a senior class, and at that time it was, I think of Nick Needham as the captain of that squad, and the tradition that they had the day before a game was we would go to Old Country Buffet, and just whatever it was, you just go there and eat as much as you can. And back in the day, we thought that was the best way to fuel ourselves before a big game. I think over time that tradition kind of changed. I think by the time I was a senior, we switched over to Olive Garden, which was all you can eat pasta or something. These are the decisions of a 16 and 18-year-old kids. But yeah, I have so many good memories here. I think about, we had, my best memories, truthfully, here, I think were in the weight room. It was really where I think the bonds grew, and where, I think about some of the guys who I played with. Brian Socorro was a guy that I mentioned. Robbie Meek was one of my best friends through high school, still very close. He went and played at North Dakota. You got Zilka before my time, who went to NDSU. You see the way some of these guys go to work, and I think just like any program, if you can get a few culture builders, people that kind of bring that work ethic and intensity, and also just kind of desire to get better together, that's something I don't think every school has. And I found that each class that I was around had a few of those guys that people kind of rallied around, and that's part of what I enjoyed most about here. But I don't know. There was a night before my senior year. It was right when captain's practice started, and we were at a girl's house who had a pool, just because her parents were willing to have a bunch of the football guys over. And at that time, I had not longer hair, but just a normal haircut. And somehow, some way, I decided to shave my head that day, and I've had this haircut ever since. I don't know why. It's just kind of I've just stuck with it ever since. But it was me and 5 of the seniors decided to shave our heads before the season, and I might be the only one that actually kept it going all this time. Not that there's any great story behind that, but it's something that I've kind of stuck with. Yeah, and then it's just, there's just different games, different points in time. I don't look back and think that we have any just signature wins. We never went and won a state title, but there's so many good games and good competition. Playing in, what was the Lake Conference then. Had the opportunity to play against guys like Trevor Laws, went to Notre Dame, played in the NFL. Mark LaVore, Notre Dame, Patriots, NFL. But it's a good conference, good football, and just a ton of good memories. I don't know where to go on crazy stories, but there's a crew of of people that I still play fantasy football with. You know, I talk about Robbie Meek. That's probably the guy that I'm closest with. But Ryan Wolf, he was our running back then. Good guy. And then I think about my brother's grade. You know, he was a 2006 guy. It's kind of this interesting transition. You know, when I was here, we ran like the wing T. It was a traditional offense that had been here a long time. And I don't know if it was the year after me or 2 years after, but Coach Lang took over and brought in the spread offense, and it really took off. You know, it was an early transition to an offense that, like, you know, everybody's running now, but it was really fun to see them, you know, go from, you know, we were always like strong middle of the pack is kind of how I would characterize our teams. We were above 500. We would always seem to run into Eden Prairie in sections, and, you know, we'd play them tough, but could never get past them. That was kind of an interesting point in time where, like, we were in a really good spot, you know, a really, like, strong spot there, and it was fun to see my brother and his buddies have a nice run. And, you know, like, Spillman's a guy who he actually married my wife's cousin, so Mike Spillman and I are now family, and I don't know if he still owns a lot of the passing records here, but just another nice little Bloomington connection that I still see quite often now.